Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John. We're still looking at John chapter 9. Now we've seen that the Pharisees have been interviewing this man who was healed by Jesus. He'd been blind from birth, and Jesus gave him his sight. Of course, they don't want to believe it. They can't deny the miracle, but they're not going to believe in Jesus, and so they keep questioning the man. And in yesterday's session, we saw he gave that wonderful testimony. I don't know all about your theological opinions about who Jesus is, but I know one thing. I was blind, but now I see. Of course, they don't accept that, and so they continue to question him about how Jesus healed him. He gets a little exasperated, and he says, we're in verse 27, the man answered, I've told you already. I've told you how he healed me, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples as well? Well, that really made him mad. We become disciples of Jesus, they're thinking. So they hurled insults at him. They said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't know where he comes from. Notice how they insult the man. You're just ignorant. You're the kind of person that would follow this Jesus. We follow Moses. We don't know where this guy came from. And notice how he answers. This man who was healed may not be a trained theologian, but he understands things of God pretty well. The man answered, now this is remarkable. You say you don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. This fellow may not be a Pharisee. He may not be a trained theologian, but he knows the ways of God. He says, I recognize the miracle. I was blind from birth. You don't get your sight back. This fellow, Jesus, gave me my sight. He must be from God. How can it be otherwise? God does not listen to sinners. How can you call him a sinner? How can you say you don't know where he comes from? He obviously comes from God. Only one from God could do these things. He knows theology far better than those Pharisees did. Now that really makes them mad. So they replied to him, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. Now, when they said you were steeped in sin at birth, do you remember the first of the chapter? The first question the disciples asked, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? You remember the disciples had that faulty assumption there must be a sin involved. Well, the Pharisees have it as well. Listen, if you were born blind, it's because you're a sinner. You were steeped in sin at birth. We're not going to listen to you. They've got that same faulty assumption about the ways of God. So rather than recognizing God's activity in this man's life, they just write him off as a sinner and won't pay any attention at all to him. And then it says they threw him out. Now what that means is they cast him out of the synagogue. You remember earlier in the story, his parents had been unwilling to testify very much. They just affirmed he was their son. He was blind from birth. They won't say anything about Jesus because the word was already out. Anyone who claims that Jesus is the Messiah will be cast out of the synagogue. That's what they do to this man. Isn't it interesting that the religious leadership throws him out because he has felt the healing touch of Jesus? They so reject who Jesus is. They so turn their back on the ways of God. They will throw out of the synagogue, excommunicate anyone who is healed by Jesus. That's what they did to him. I have a feeling he's not too bothered by it. He's got his sight back. He can see. If these leaders want to kick me out of the synagogue, fine. God has touched my life. I can see. You know, when we feel the touch of Jesus on our life, that's all that matters. If we have Jesus, we have all that we need. And whether others can understand it or not, whether they're like the Pharisees who reject God's work, that doesn't matter. As long as we have Jesus, we don't need the approval of men. As long as we have Jesus, we have all that we need. This man had all he needed. The Lord had brought sight into his life. His darkness had become light. He had come to know the one who is the light of the world. Join us tomorrow as we conclude looking at chapter 9 in our 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John.